Are you a leader navigating burnout, doubt, or growth? Welcome to the Ripple Effect Leadership Podcast, where intentional leadership creates lasting impact. Hi, I'm Jen Brown with my co-host Hugo Rodriguez, and we're diving into real leadership stories and practical insights to help you lead with clarity, courage, and connection. Because we believe great leadership creates positive ripples at work and in life.
Hello to our Ripple Effect Leadership Podcast listeners. I'm Jen Brown, a certified life and leadership coach with Journey of Grace Coaching and with over 20 years experience as a Foreign Service Officer in the Department of State, where I had the pleasure of working with my dear friend and colleague, Hugo Rodriguez. Hugo, over to you.
Thank you, Jen. As Jen said, my name is Hugo Rodriguez. I am also an executive coach and a professor of practice in leadership. Like Jen, I'm a former Foreign Service officer, a diplomat with 25 years experience leading teams at the Department of State, both domestically and abroad. And you may ask yourself, why are two former diplomats talking about leadership? Well, diplomacy really is about leadership. It's about people. It is about understanding their needs and dreams and understanding your own goals and objectives and then working together to get to that place. It requires a lot of emotional intelligence. Jen is amazing at that. So Jen, tell us what we're going to talk about today.
Well, we are going to talk about leading from within because we are all leaders. We are all influencing from wherever we are. And the inner work that is needed to be a ripple effect leader is just really so important. We cannot lead others at home, at work, in our community if we're not leading ourselves. And this topic is near and dear to my heart, as I know it is to Hugo's as well. Really, this is about getting to the mental and emotional load that we all carry. And I know I've had to do a lot of work on myself in this area. I get to work with clients who are also doing the same work. On paper, it looks like we're all doing great. We show up in the office, we're rocking it or appear to be rocking it. And behind the scenes, not so much. There's this self-doubt, decision fatigue, overwhelm, burnout going on. We feel like we're cracking at all levels. And this is where the inner work becomes so critical because we really cannot lead from that place of cracking. And so let's talk about why this matters. We've mentioned before on this podcast some of the numbers, and numbers really do matter here because over 70% of leaders feel that they are facing higher stress since stepping into leadership roles. Over 80% of employees feel that they are at the risk of burnout. Well, what do we do if these numbers actually result in burnout, right? How do we continue to show up? And so when we start to think about what's behind these self-doubts, this risk of burnout, well, it gets to the mental work. And so I'm going to ask Hugo to share what comes up for you, Hugo, when you hear the word saboteur.
Well, let me just go back and say, so much of what you said is just spot on, right? And this isn't just a leaders thing. This is an everyone at work thing. And so many times I've heard the people I'm coaching or the people I'm leading say, I have imposter syndrome. Mm. Right? Like, I think we all carry some level of imposter syndrome. If you are not feeling sometimes like a fake in your role, then I worry that you might be in the wrong role, right? I mean, I think imposter syndrome is part and parcel of the stress that we all feel to do things we're not comfortable with, right? To lean into the discomfort, the unusual, the uncertain. There's just so much of that at work today, whether you're leading a team or you're a member of a team. It is the byproduct of the work that we do in the world today. So,
well, and if I can just add, let's jump into the imposter syndrome because that's part of the mental work that's going on here that we need to address. So also, let's throw some numbers out there. 70 to 84% of people experience imposter syndrome. So this does hit everybody. And I know for me, in July, I went to this amazing women's leadership conference in Wilmington, North Carolina. Phenomenal business leaders and community leaders in the room. And I walked in with imposter syndrome. I thought, I have made a career transition. I am new to this community. What do I know to belong in this room? Throwing out my career of leadership experience, that imposter syndrome kicked in big time for me. And I had to do my own work in stepping back and grounding myself, doing some breath work, and really getting rooted in my values as to why I was there and what
Wow,
impact I wanted to have. So
that's awesome.
this imposter syndrome is just huge. It's what we do with it that really matters. And let's talk a little bit about those thoughts that are behind what I just described, what we call the
Tell me
saboteur
what it brings
thoughts.
up for you. What are those thoughts for you?
Oh, well, first of all, the main thought is you're not good enough. You don't belong here. What have you done to show this level of success in life? Throwing out the evidence of what I know to be true in terms of success, right? It's this, your worth is your success. And for me, it was, you've made this career pivot. You're not there yet, wherever there is in quotes. And also thoughts that have come up big time for me in my life is people pleasing, right? Like, let me take care of others. Let me make everyone else happy. That is me giving out to the community, to my team, when in fact, it's not always from that authentic place of really caring. It is in a way to make me feel good about myself. And there's an element of manipulation if I'm being truly honest. So I had to do a lot of work on that one because that one really hurt, to get real about people pleasing. And the idea of controlling, like I wanted to control the situation at this leadership event. And I had to really let go of control because I had to walk into a room and not be in control and not know so many people. So
Wow.
there's a lot there. Where
There
do you
is
want to start?
a lot there. And those are, really common saboteurs that you talk about. And there are other saboteurs as well. And they're going to show up for people in different ways at different times. And, if you look uh, back on your own personal history, you can see, like, as infants, the sort of the spark that begins a lot of those saboteurs. I always point back to, always wanting to get good grades in school, right? Like always wanting to be able to bring home a good report card for my parents, and not not taking risks because I might get a C, right? I want to take the courses that I know I can do well in, and part of the part of that imposter syndrome is anytime you venture beyond what's comfortable, there's a bit of fake in it to start, right? Like
Yes.
you're gonna step into a role that you are not prepared for. That's growing. That's what we all need to be doing is taking those risks and trying things we cannot do yet so that we learn how to do them. But you're going to be in that space of feeling like I'm not good enough. I'm not doing enough. I don't know how to do this. I'm going to fail. And I think a lot of that goes back to our childhood, right? Where we laid in these patterns of behavior that then start to become counterproductive as you get older.
Yeah.
So anyway, you and I both have had some amazing opportunities to get insight on this through PQ, positive intelligence, the model for sort of recognizing these behaviors and becoming more self-aware, right? On the
Yes.
journey to emotional intelligence. That first half of that is that self-awareness. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about PQ, about positive intelligence, and about Shirzad?
Yeah, I would love to. So Shirzad Chamine founded Positive Intelligence, and the premise, in my words here, really get to that being self-aware of these saboteur autopilot inner critic thoughts that come up for all of us. And as Hugo was mentioning, these thoughts are really rooted in the strengths that we were born with. So that ability to get good grades, right? Hard work, learning, those are all strengths. And I will talk about those as an example because I too share that. As a child, I learned great feedback came when I got straight A's.
Mm-hmm.
And so my strength in school became this saboteur critic voice in my head by my teens, early 20s, when if it wasn't perfect, I didn't want to do it. If it meant risk and I got a C instead of an A, I didn't want to do it. So it's really taking our strengths to this point that we abuse them. And then these inner critic autopilot thoughts really start taking control of our thought process and creating negative impact in our lives. Like it's taking all of these good characteristics and running on steroids is what I call it.
Right.
And so it's then the work becomes, how do we catch those thoughts first? Awareness is always the first step, as we've talked about. And then doing some, for our listeners, I'll call it mindfulness activities. I call it mental fitness. PQ calls it mental fitness activities, in a way that center ourselves so that we step back from those thoughts and give our brains the opportunity to lean into a different way of thinking intentionally.
So the muscle that consumes the most calories in the human body is the brain. And over the course of human evolution, the human has recognized that if your brain is constantly working, you are exhausted all of the time. And so the brain comes up with these shortcuts. Like you were saying, like, I want to get positive stimuli. I want to get positive rewards. So I get A's, right? You don't even think about that. I'm going to get A's so that I can, so that my parents tell me I'm a good boy, right? And that becomes a pattern of thinking. Over time, that becomes a people pleasing thing. Like, I want to get that positive response, so I'm going to do the things that please the people around me. And it's easier not to think about it. It consumes less calories than actively thinking, does this make sense in this situation? Am I going to have to think about this every single time I interact with people? No, you come up with these shortcuts. What Shirzad Shamin talks about is, you need to kind of rewire your brain to come up with better shortcuts and to give your brain the chance to sort of rest, reset, and actually consider what's the best outcome here, instead of defaulting to those saboteurs that no longer serve you as a leader or as a thought worker, to put into place better responses. And he calls these your sages.
Yes.
Right? If you build the habit of your sages through mental fitness, as you said, you're going to end up both stronger, mentally able to tackle tough situations, and you're going to be happier. You're going to end up with better outcomes. So the 5 sage powers are: empathize, especially with regard to yourself, right? Like, forgive yourself. When you are feeling that imposter syndrome set in, recognize it, right? Say, oh, I feel like I shouldn't be here, but you know what? It's okay, because I know I need to try new things to grow. And if I fail, that's another way of learning and growing. So you give yourself grace in that space. Explore is the second sage power. So you ask yourself, I feel like I'm an imposter, but what else might be going on here? Like, actually, I do have the skills that mean I should be in this room. I do have the presentation skills to deliver this and do so effectively. So what else might be true? Yeah, I might feel like an imposter. Maybe I haven't given as many presentations as some people, but I do have skills.
I would add too,
Third,
it's the explore.
yeah, go ahead.
I would add too, in the explore, it's what is possible from here. What
Yeah,
connections are possible? What growth is possible?
yeah, absolutely. But that curiosity to be willing to explore, that's a great sage power. And it's also kind of lies at the heart of coaching.
Yes.
The third sage power is innovate, try something new, right? If what you are doing is lighting up your saboteurs, if it is, you know, pushing you to feel like you're just pleasing, innovate, try something different,
Yes.
right? Fourth stage power is navigate, making sure that you think in terms of what are your values. Am I doing this because it's what someone expects of me, or am I doing this because it matters to me? Right? This comes up as a central value. I want to be here. I want to deliver great work on this, not because my boss is going to give me a pat on the back, but because this is something that matters to me.
And it's navigating options. It's really like navigating how you are going forward.
I love that. The fifth and last sage power is activate. So when you are navigating and you're choosing between desired actions, take a clear, focused action, right? Uh, Viktor Frankl, this is one of my favorite quotes, and I think about this all the time. Viktor
Mm.
Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, he was a Holocaust survivor. He wrote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response.
Mm.
And so your saboteurs kick in, and that is like the stimulus, and you just feel like I've got to get myself out of here, right? I shouldn't be here. I need to move into a different space. That's the response. You need to pause. We talk about, taking a beat, slowing down. So that stimulus where you think, oh, wait, I shouldn't be here. Take a pause and then engage your sage powers. Empathize, explore what else might be true here, right? Maybe try something new. Look at the different options that are available to you. But in that pause, that's where you get to choose. And that's where you get to activate your sage and move forward in the way that is most aligned with your values.
Mm.
Let me pause there. This is something that even better than I do, Jen. So if I didn't hit that quite right, please correct it and tell me what you think about it.
No, I love how you laid out the framework of positive intelligence here in its entirety, because I think this is an important framework for us to talk about leadership. And I think for our listeners, it's important to talk about what these autopilot inner critic voices can look like on the job. So it is, I need to fire someone and I'm a people pleaser and I don't want to do that. I don't want this conflict. Um, Also along those lines could be avoiding the hard action, right? Because we don't
Yeah.
want to create that lack of harmony and hurt someone. It could be going from one successful job to another because self-worth can be identified in that success. So constantly striving for excellence and perfection. And so what do we do when these autopilot voices show up in a way that keep us running, keep our adrenaline running? When we see the risk in everything, and it almost paralyzes us because of the risk. So I said step one really is being aware of those thoughts. So slowing down and creating an intentional response instead of reaction is really the foundation of this work. I think that's really hard to do when we're in busy leadership roles. So what I would offer is, once we start to be aware of those thoughts, what is it that you can do as a leader to snap the thought, is what I like to call it. It can be breathing. There are a whole range of exercises out there. What I have found, especially in stressful situations, in meetings, in public, I'm not going to close my eyes and breathe and meditate. Not going to work for me, especially while I'm driving, and I can get super stressed while I'm driving, right? So one thing that I find is taking two fingertips together and just rubbing them to the point where I'm really feeling the ridges in my fingertips. That can help me stop a thought and start to bring me down. And I can put my hands under my desk and no one knows what I'm doing. I can be in public, meeting people, and just have my hands beside me, and people may not recognize what I'm doing. But what I am doing now is grounding me in a way to not be in that autopilot reactive state. And the way that I like to describe this then is thinking about what are the opportunities out there for me. As Hugo talked about those sage powers, I like to kind of reverse engineer what is the result that I'm looking for, and then work my way backwards of what actions in that activate category do I need to take. And then, continuing to work backwards to the point where I get to what thoughts do I really need to have to be able to lean into those actions. And so that sounds like a lot of work, and yet it's not so much work once we start getting in the habit. Hugo, what's your experience been in catching your saboteurs and shifting your thoughts?
So for me, over time, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I notice now when I am not in a good space, either I'm moving too fast, which causes me to make mistakes. It prevents me from being able to hear, other people's good ideas. I'm either jumping from thing to thing without really thinking about it. I feel like my breath gets shallow, right?
Yeah.
It's a very different feeling when you can pull a full breath than when you're just sort of, getting spun about something. And so over time, I've come to recognize those kind of signals that, whoa, I'm spinning, right?
Yes.
And just to like take a beat. Sometimes for me, that means, you know what? I need to get up and walk away from my desk, maybe go for a walk around the office, go outside, go for a brief walk, out in the sunshine, anything to sort of break the link between whatever is driving me and a better, calmer, more thoughtful state of being. I get the rubbing of the fingertips together, right? It's just it gives you something to concentrate on that breaks the mental chain of whatever's pulling you, right,
Yes.
forward, whether that's whatever type of saboteur that is, the people pleaser or the imposter syndrome. For me, like, I have I feel it in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And when I feel that, I know I need to like give myself the space, like Viktor Frankl says, between the stimulus and the response. Because the response, if I am on autopilot, is never the best, right? If I can open that space up between those two things, be present for a moment, be thoughtful, I think we say, oh, wait a second. I know what's going on here. I feel I'm afraid, right? Let's say I got a new big project at work. It's way outside my comfort zone. I'm starting to stress about it. The stress loop gets faster and faster and faster. And then I just need to break that stress loop and say, okay, hold on a second. This is not helpful to be successful with this new project. Let that stress go, find a way to break it mentally. And now I'm going to come in with those sage habits. What small action can I take that will move that project forward? Let me take a bite-sized piece of it, right?
Yes, that's key.
Right? So you are trying to replace the stress spinning of I'm in over my head, then I don't have enough time to get this done, I don't understand what my boss is looking for, to then just stop, find a way to take a deep breath and come back and say, okay, I'm going to look at the sage responses to this. What else might be true? Oh, I do know how to do this, right? I want to take action. What's a small action I can take that's going to move this forward? I'm going to take that item on my to-do list. I'm going to break it into 10 smaller items, little steps. Then I'm going to take a step. And all of a sudden, that stress spiral that I was in is broken. And I can say, all right, I took that step. I'm going to take the next step. I'm going to
Yes.
take the next step. I'm going to ask the next question. I'm going to ask, what else can be true in this space? So
Yes.
for me, I feel it physically. And I know when I'm starting to feel that stuff, it is time to snap it, take a break, and then come back in a more thoughtful, paced approach.
I love that you brought in the physical feeling of that, because I think many of us do feel something physical in our bodies. And it's when we're paying attention to the body, whether it's sweaty palms, the pit in the stomach, the shortness of breath, or the shoulders start to feel the stress, right? When we are paying attention, the body gives us those signals. And you're so right. Can we take that break and do the walk, or get away from the issue at hand? If we're not able to do that, then I think the fingertip thing is in the moment, just some way to sort of calm the presence here. I think that both are needed, because that walk is more of that longer term separation to give the brain space to think. So we have to just know what environment we're in, right? If we're in a meeting, we can't just get up and walk out. So just what are the things that we can do in that present moment, micro moment, if you will. But something else that you said really stands out to me, of one small step. This is not work that we are going to change our thought patterns overnight. Certainly this is over 50 years of thinking this way. So that's not changing overnight for me. And so it is one small step that we can take. And what I have found, and I'm curious for your thoughts, is that when we have that one small step, our brain starts to see evidence of what is possible. And when we think about where else we have been successful, we bring in that evidence of what's possible, what has been successful, what we know to be true about ourselves. And once we start doing that and celebrating that evidence, the brain starts to catch those negative thoughts so much faster and get us to the place of being in a more thoughtful, intentional response pattern.
Love that. That is absolutely true. It gets at that imposter syndrome thing, which we know is irrational, right? And when you can stop that negative thought spiral and reflect, I've done similar things successfully, right?
Yes.
I don't have to be afraid of failing here, because I know how to do things. I've done it before. And then you can have that deep breath, break the challenge down into smaller pieces, and start to demonstrate to yourself, yeah, I know how to do that. I can do that. I can do that. And so it just happens. I think it's important to also mention, imposter syndrome happens to all of us, happens to men as well as women.
Yes. Men don't get the
is,
credit on that front. You often think of women with this. So elaborate for us. Tell us about a time when you faced it.
All the time. I mean, like, if I am honest with myself, and one of my values is learning and growing, so I am looking for ways to push myself into areas that I know nothing about. And I invariably think, wow, I'm in over my head, like I am going to fail. I shouldn't be in this space. I'm an imposter to this. And then you have to do, like we talked about, reflect back on, okay, what else can be possible? What else can be true? And what are effective responses here? What are activities I can undertake to feel confident? But I used to talk about in our career as diplomats, we were often called on to step in for a vacancy in the leadership, where you step up and you are acting in the supervisory role. And that always, in my career, it happened fairly regularly that I was called on to sort of cover a vacancy in my boss's slot, right? That boss might get promoted off to do something else, and it's going to be a year until the new boss arrives. And so they asked me to sort of step in and act in that capacity. And it would feel, I'd invariably feel the imposter syndrome, right? Like, who am I? Yesterday I was just one of the people on this team. All of a sudden I'm asked to lead this team. I'm just like
Yes.
everybody else. How can I lead this team? When yesterday I was a member of the team. It always felt like putting on an extra large suit and just being a small person in a huge suit. Over time, you start to grow into the suit. And I know that. And so over time, again, leaning into your humility, you don't want to go and say, hey, everybody, I'm the boss now, and we're all going to do it my way, right? You have
Right.
to find the appropriate voice to lead your peers, essentially. But over time, you find that, and you grow into that role, and you hopefully do it honoring your team and raising them up and all of those things we talk about. But, little by little, you take those steps to grow into that suit, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes you have to take a smaller job and it feels like climbing into a smaller suit and you're like constrained, but you have to learn how to be comfortable in that role as well.
Yeah.
When you are, for whatever reason, forced into a job with less responsibility or less authority, and you're like, but I know how to make decisions like that. And your boss is like, I don't want you making those decisions. Like, that isn't your role. Your role is now prescribed. And so you're
Right.
in the smaller suit, and it can be uncomfortable as well. It's kind of it is also a type of imposter syndrome, right? Like you could do
Yeah.
other things, but you've got to learn to do this.
Right.
And leaning into that learning is part of it. But again, I often go back to that Viktor Frankl quote, because if you are simply going through life reacting, you get all of these negative unintended consequences. It's
That's right.
breaking that tie between the stimulus and the reaction to give yourself the space in the middle to create a thoughtful response to the stimuli.
Yes.
And that is so powerful.
And I want to share, because what you're really getting at is being intentional in our responses and being intentional in taking ownership of the thoughts that come in, how we step back, and then how we lean in again. And when we do that, we're talking about leadership in the workplace, right? There's leadership at home. And when we do that same concept at home, we see differences in our relationships outside of work. Even when we're focused on doing that inside work, the us who we bring home is a different person. And so it is that ripple effect of how we show up at home, at work, in the community, how we're taking care of ourselves. Because once we start to change our mindset, right, how we carry that stress, how we sleep is all impacted too.
Oh, absolutely. It's so important because what's the best way to say this? You're going to carry your saboteurs and your sages into the office, into home, into church, into your clubs, onto your sports teams, right? This
Yeah.
stuff shows up everywhere.
Yeah.
And having a good way of managing those negative responses to stimuli and transforming them into more productive, creative responses, it's going to make your life happier and happier, not just for you, but for everybody around you. Right?
So very true. So very true. So for me, this work is foundational in leadership in life. It is really being the leader, the CEO of our brains.
Oh, I love that. I love that. You and I have both been coached in the PQ framework, the positive intelligence framework, through Jameen's methodology. I actually have gone through it a couple of times because I'm constantly working on that. I'm constantly
Yeah.
working to identify the negative reactions, the saboteur reactions that are, programmed in, but are not helpful, and learning to convert those to sage
Absolutely.
reactions, right?
It is ongoing work for sure. And I have clients who in that space feel that they can take that pause and to see that shift. And it is a slow shift in some ways. And in some ways you start to see some immediate, like, oh yeah, that's what's going on here.
Oh yeah,
So
exactly.
the growth is like so exciting in that space.
Yeah,
And it's work I do every day too, right? Because these thoughts don't go away.
that's right. And when we talk about emotional intelligence and the first half of emotional intelligence, identifying, recognizing your emotions, and then finding ways to manage them productively, that's what this is. And there
That's
are
it.
lots of methodologies out there. This one happens to be the one that you and I both know, and it has been helpful for me and for you, I think, as well. But there are lots of ways to get at that. And as a
Yeah.
leader, that emotional intelligence, you really have to have a pretty good handle on your own, like recognizing and managing your own emotional, health check
Yeah.
in order to be effective as a leader for your teams. And so I recommend positive intelligence to all of our listeners. And I don't know, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you find it and what it
Yeah.
entails.
Yeah. So we'll include in the show notes a link to a free assessment that you can take online, which will tell you what your top saboteur voices are and how you rank. And then if you're interested in exploring more, reach out. Can certainly do some coaching around that work. It's so important to have that awareness of what's going on in our brains. And I think in general, when we see the results, there are no real surprises there.
No surprises, but the impact is huge.
Exactly.
When you start to find the way to manage that and to recognize and manage it, wow, it
Yeah.
just it lifts a load off of your shoulders and allows you to do so much more.
Indeed. And if this episode resonated with you, please give us a like. Please share with anyone who may benefit. We are here just to try to help lift you in your leadership journey. So thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you again.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Ripple Effect Leadership Podcast. If this episode sparked an insight or reminded you of someone, please share it and help forward the ripple. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review so more leaders can find their way here. You can find us on LinkedIn at Jen Brown-Coach and at HF Rodriguez Jr. and more leadership content and coaching tools at journeyofgracecoaching.com. A quick heads up before you go. This podcast and all content shared by Ripple Effect Leadership is for informational and educational purposes only. The opinions and characterizations in this podcast are our own and do not necessarily represent the U.S. government. This podcast is not a substitute for mental health treatment or professional medical advice. If you are struggling, we encourage you to reach out to a licensed mental health provider or call the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You don't have to do this alone.